Hi, guys. My name is Thaon Simms, and welcome to the Limitless Podcast. Joining us as always is your co host, Matthew Preston. Hail up the people, and Matthew.
Hey guys, what's good?
Excellent, excellent. Today, I thought we'd be doing something a bit different. We're taking it back to basics, right? I see that a lot of people have been requesting us talk more about dividends. And so I decided to, let's just do a mini series on dividends. Let's just talk about dividends, break it up into a bit how to invest in dividends on the Jamaica Stock Exchange. But I think this introductory video is going to be more about like just key concepts about dividends, keeping it very simple, very light, right?
Mhm.
I hope you guys like this content. And if you do, leave a comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, because this is something I think we'll be doing pretty frequently. It's going to be a mini series. Maybe, I don't know, 5 to 6. We could do several episodes on dividends. So I think we should just start it with just some core concepts, some key fundamental things on dividends. Sounds good?
Mm-hmm.
How you
I'm ready
feeling,
to learn.
Preston? All right, let's get into it.
It's gonna make me like the new Buffett, right?
Even better. We're gonna be like, who was Buffett? But you heard of this guy Preston from Limitless? Yeah. All right. So now, if you could make money while you sleep, right? Would you? I feel like that's why everybody is on this channel. Because, there is a way. And dividend investing is one of those ways to do that. So today I'm just going to break down how to earn passive income like the pros, like Matthew Preston. So the first question is really and truly, what are dividends? And I did create a little slide. And I've been wondering if Preston could just share it a bit. Yeah. So the first question really and truly is, what are dividends, right? And in the simplest of terms, a dividend is just a portion of a company's profits distributed to its shareholders, as a reward for like investing in the company. It's essentially a way for companies to share earnings with investors instead of like reinvesting all the profits right back into growth. So I think of dividends as like rent payments. When you own a rental property, tenants pay you rent every month, right? So now imagine owning a piece of a company. So you own shares in a company, and some companies just pay you rent for holding the stock, and that rent is called dividends. It's just a share of the company's, and I'm gonna say a share of company's profits for simplicity for now. But it's a share of the company's profits paid to investors. So pretty simple, right? But then why pay dividends in the first place? Now, there are several reasons why companies pay dividends, right? One, they could do it to attract investors, right? So many investors, they seek, stable income generating stocks. When I just started investing, people told me to invest in blue chip stocks that pay dividends. I pay dividends like twice a year or quarterly and so on. And so that trickles down from the company paying dividends to financial institutions and their brokers recommending those companies that pay dividends. And so that attracts investors to those companies. So that's one way. That's one reason why companies pay dividends. Another is actually to reward shareholders. So companies that actually consistently pay dividends, they build trust and loyalty among investors. It's almost, think of it like a bonus for sticking with them, right? And sometimes you can even see who the majority shareholders are and so on. And if they depend on dividends, if they depend on the money that they earn from dividend income, ding, ding, ding. Any companies you think of that, the a heavily weighted, shareholder kind of wants dividends when the company isn't really paying dividends, and they do everything in their power to ensure dividends are paid. Any light bulbs in your head, Preston?
Wait, what? You're saying a company that The
Yeah,
largest shareholder wants the dividends.
not necessarily the largest, but yes, could be the largest, or a large shareholder is incentivized by the company paying dividends. So they try
Like a
to.
Dolphin Cove.
Okay, a Dolphin Cove is good. Yes, Dolphin Cove is actually a great example, right? Where the majority shareholder, I mean, they always pay dividends, Dolphin Cove. So, and I'm pretty sure the majority shareholder, what is it? Sea of
I think it's
Dolphin,
World of Dolphins.
World of Dolphins. Sorry, yeah, World of Dolphins. Yeah. Okay.
You were thinking of a specific example?
I mean,
It sounded
there's
like you had an
several.
example. No, it sounded like you had a specific example. Or one that you want me to say.
Yeah, I was thinking like NCB.
Mm.
You know, Michael Leachin coming back and restructuring the company and trying to get them to pay dividends. And they did pay dividends. So kudos to him and the NCB shareholders. And another reason why companies pay dividends also it shows financial strength, right? A history of steady dividends can mean that a company is solid, right? And sometimes they may also just have excessive profits, an excess of profits. So some companies actually they don't really want or they can't afford to pay. They can afford to pay out, sorry, instead of reinvesting the funds that they have into the company. They can afford to pay it. So sometimes they just pay a dividend. So those are some reasons why company pay dividend. Now, dividends as a source of passive income, right? It's great for a lot of people because you can throw your money on it, forget about it, right? And then you can see dividend income coming in. You'll get like that direct deposit. Big up to Learn, Grow, Invest, Jermaine and Demetrius. They both really love dividends, and I think they did episodes. I remember Demetrius is on. They both did episodes on dividend investing. Yes, I remember both of them, and they have several episodes on them. You can check out their channels. But those you have certain types of investors that just they want to receive dividends without needing to sell their shares, right? And that
They
makes
want
it
to
a
receive
great
money
tool.
without needing to sell their shares, you mean?
Yeah, sorry, receive money without needing to sell their shares, and that's why the people love dividends. Right? It's a great tool for like long-term wealth building. Because can you imagine that you just get paid for holding on to an investment? It's kind of cool, to be honest. So when you think about it, let me give you an example. Let's say you own Grace Kennedy. You own some shares in Grace Kennedy, right? And they pay a dividend that's maybe 50 cents per share in dividends. And you own 1,000 shares. So if you own 1,000 shares and for each share you get 50 cents, you actually make 500 JMD. And you don't lift a finger. Now, when you go into further, so that's literally your 500 JMD just like that. Now, of course, there are some other things that we will go into in the future on, talking about dividend tax and so on. But the fact that you can buy the company, forget about it, and literally get some form of cash flow. Yeah. So dividends do provide steady cash flow, and capital gains relies on market appreciation, and we'll talk about capital gains soon. But who do you think benefits the most from dividends?
The largest shareholders or the people who own a lot of shares.
So definitely, so those people definitely benefit the most in terms of I guess a monetary value. But there are also some people that do benefit in a different way. So I think of it as retirees, right? Retirees and income investors. I think they rely heavily on dividends to cover expenses without selling stocks. So those are the top people I can think of. They use it for like living expenses and so
Or
on.
I guess the pension. Because technically, people may not realize that their pension is investing in sometimes stocks, and then the that stock should be paying out the dividends, and then that helps the payouts to get your pension every whatever period.
Precisely. Yeah. So pension funds do love dividend-paying stocks because that's cash flow for them. Even when you think about like a company like Mayberry loves dividend-paying stocks as well because that's cash flow for them as well. So, and other funds love that as well. Long-term investors also love dividends, right? Because they reinvest those dividends for compound growth. So and other people, that's another strategy that we should talk about, reinvesting dividends, because you don't need to spend the dividend unless you want to, but you don't need to spend it. You could use that money, collect the dividend, and then buy back more shares on the market. And that allows you to compound for growth. So that increases your long-term returns over time. Because if you get paid from a company, you buy more shares in the company with the money that you're being paid for, your payout will be, well, if all is equal, your payout will be higher the next time they pay dividends. Just, as I said, all being equal, they pay out the same amount, the price hasn't moved, etc. So, I see why people really and truly love dividends. So yes. Next slide, Preston. So there are a few types of dividends, all right? There are, and not all dividends are created equal, right? So you have cash dividends. That's the most common dividends you will see, right? So an example is like NCB paying shareholders real cash. You can withdraw it, or you can reinvest it, or you could have stock dividends. And stock dividends a bit different. So if a company issues, like, let's say, a 10% stock dividend and you own 100 shares, that can become 110 shares without spending a dime. And that's, stock in that company if it does that. And you also have special dividends where you get like one-time payouts. It's like a bonus check when companies make either huge profits or it's one-off payouts. Those are things that don't really happen commonly. I call them, I guess, a dividend in specie, special dividends. That's the literal translation for it. And also in stock dividends, I'm not sure if you remember, there's an example of a company paying a dividend in terms of shares, like actual stock in another company. Do you remember what company that was?
I think it's two come to mind. Blue Power and Lumber.
Okay, yeah.
And cool. What was it? Mayberry Investments Limited and Mayberry Jamaican Equities.
MJE and MIL. So I believe it was MIL that paid the dividend, and the dividend was MJE shares. And I believe there have been other instances on the market as well where that has happened. As you said, Blue Power and Lumber is one, right? I think that was a 1-to-1 payout as well. So every share you had in Blue Power, you'd get one share of Lumber Depot stock. So yeah. So there are some times where dividend isn't just cash. Pretty cool. You get shares in a new company. It's kind of nice. So yeah. And there are other dividends too, rare, unique dividends like property dividends and so on. Even liquidating dividends, like if a company shuts down, investors can get a cut of the remaining assets, that kind of stuff. But those things rarely ever happen. All right, next slide. So dividends versus capital gains. The thing that we talk about a lot, personally, me and you, Preston, and sometimes on the podcast as well, right? So of course we just learned about what dividends are, but capital gains, That's basically just profit from selling shares at a higher price. So you buy let's give an example. You buy Wigton shares at $1, and then you sell those same shares at $1.50, right? Um, you would have gained 50%, right? That's the capital gains that you would have made. And so, no, you don't get cash flow until the shares are actually sold. So you have to hold those shares until it hits that price that you've sold it at. And that's how you make your money. You make the profit based on that price differential. Now, that highly depends on the stock price rising, right? And people would say that that also is higher risk, right? And it depends on market volatility and all of those things. People do say that kind of investing is higher risk. I disagree, because dividends are also not guaranteed, just like capital gains are not guaranteed, right? Just
and
because
a lot of people probably thought that NCB would never stop paying dividends, and they stopped for like a few years.
Yeah.
And even something recently, I don't know if you heard, Walgreens?
Yes.
Yeah, apparently, I think it was Walgreens. They're like a pharmacy company in the US. Huge company, been around for years, many years. Apparently they've been paying dividends for years and years and years, like probably over 50 years or something like that. And they recently announced that they're gonna stop paying dividends. So it's like, hey, what if you were an investor in that company and you depended on that income,
Exactly.
And then they announced that, hey, yeah, it's almost like if you had a job and they're like, hey, we're gonna fire you. And you can't. I mean, at least you'd be able to like sell your shares, but then, for example, the share price I think dropped significantly when that was announced, because people are like, hey, if I was in this because you're a dividend payer. I don't know what kind of yield you are getting on the dividends, but yeah, that was something that's you do have to watch out for. So people, I think, sometimes think, oh, that just because it's like, say you're living off of the dividends, you don't need to watch the company, but I still think you should occasionally check up on the company, because if the company is able to pay out the dividends by generating cash, and then something's going on with the business, it can't generate the cash, it won't be able to generate the dividends. So that's something to check up on.
Yep, 100%. Even when I think of a company like, who's that? Carreras pays regular dividends, but suppose one day there's some regulation that either stops or limits the sale of cigarettes. Carreras would be in big trouble, and it would be hard for them to consistently be paying dividends over time. Granted, they went through some hard times, I think during COVID, and they did a lot to continue to pay dividends during COVID. And I guess that will lead me to my next point as to how dividends are paid from companies. So, no, you can keep going. So that was just the difference between capital gains and dividends. I'm finished there. Well, it's not necessarily the next point, but dividend investing versus growth investing. So people say, there's always this whole discourse on which is better. People are saying, some people love dividends. Some people, will always defend dividends, and they say I'm playing it safe or so on, or are you meant in more growth investing where it's more capital appreciation and so on? But then there's always that flip side, is it higher risk, etc. So sometimes you'll see dividend paying stocks are more stable, mature companies, the ones that pay regular dividends. And, that's more passive income, etc. Whereas, well, it's still it's still passive, but dividends are a bit more passive than capital gains, if you get where I'm coming from. Like, you actively have to be buying and selling to get the capital, to get cap gains, whereas with dividends you just buy and hold. But yes, people say the risk tolerance is lower for dividends, we also just showed you that it's not necessarily the case. Each company has its own idiosyncrasies. So I would say evaluate any company you're in, no matter what, whether it's you're investing for growth in terms of capital appreciation or whether you're investing for dividends. You
I
have to
think
always be
another
looking
thing
at.
I'd say is that it really comes down to your goal, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're an investor and you're like, hey, I need 100% in 1 year, right? You're not really going to find that with a dividend, or 100% in 2 years or 3 years. You're not really going to find that with dividend, like the dividend alone from the stock. I don't think any stocks really pay out dividends like that. Maybe there's like a one-off special dividend, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's your goal, then unless, for example, the company could grow in share price, like you're saying, okay, I'll buy it at $10, I'll sell it at $20, and then in addition, I'll get X amount in dividends, that you could factor in the dividend to help to get your return. But if you're looking for very aggressive returns or significant returns, like you're trying to build wealth, then the dividend alone, I don't think will get you there. Versus if you're someone who's already wealthy and you're like, hey, I just need 10% of my money a year and I'm good because I'm already built up my money, then yeah, dividends may make sense for you. So it doesn't necessarily make sense for everybody, but there are some people that it makes a lot of sense for.
Yeah. Excellent point, Preston. It does always go right back to your goal and depend on your goal. You said a one-off dividend. Any companies you think may pay a very large one-off dividend? I guess that's homework for me and other investors. But there is a company that I'm thinking about, but can't say now because need to do more research. But let's go on to the next slide. So now, how do companies fund dividends, right? Now, I said it was paid out from profits, and they usually are paid out from the company's profits. So if a company is selling bag juice, all right, let's say I own a bag juice company let's say I own a bag juice company and I sell a bunch of bag juice and my profit is $1 million, and I decide to pay 10% of my profits for that year in dividends, boom, there you go. There's your dividend. And it's split up based on the shares. So I'm paying out $1 million. Well, let's say I'm paying out 10% of that. So $100,000. And there are 100,000 shares out there. So it's $1 per share. Great dividend, right? However, and that's best case scenario. And it's sustainable long term. But sometimes companies actually pay from cash reserves. Now, dividends technically are paid from retained earnings, and that's a bit different. Retained earnings, if you look, it's on the balance sheet, whereas net profit is on the income statement, and that's when you actually look through a company's financials and see. But retained earnings is a bit different. It's more like accumulated profits or losses, I guess, but profits that a company keeps instead of distributing to shareholders as dividends. So that's more what retained earnings is. And profits is more like what the money that a company makes after expenses, taxes, costs are deducted from revenue. So it's a little bit different. But yes, if profits dip, then you can go into your cash reserves and pay. And I'm pretty sure one example is Carreras, where they did that. Where profits dip, but they dipped into retained earnings to be able to pay a dividend. And sometimes companies do it. And in the extreme case where, shareholders do demand dividends, sometimes you can't even borrow money to pay dividends. It's risky, yes. To me, that's a red flag. It's not the best use of debt, but because there's always going to be some form of interest rate, more than likely, on that. But it is possible to be able to borrow money to pay dividends as well. So that's just something to note. And yeah, there goes those key concepts on investing in dividends. I hope you guys really and truly like this episode. And if you want to see more of this kind of content as we go into more detail and so on, let us know. Let us know in the comments below. because we have a lot to share. And this was just, just the start, just the tip of the iceberg. Thank you guys for listening. Like the video if you liked it. Share it with a friend who wants to get into investing. And let's get those limitless gains. Limitless out.
Peace.